Hey guys, welcome back to Baltimore Comic Con. That talk with Scotty Young and Humberto Ramos was an absolute blast. And so we're going to keep the fun train rolling. Here to introduce our next guest, Mr. Al Ewing. We have Amy Dallin and Mr. Coy Jandro. Guys, how are you doing? I'm going to change that background because we're not talking about Strange Academy anymore, sadly.
Still
It's
real
great
cute, though.
Big fan. It can be there. I mean, it's up to Al, but it can be there.
There we go. Coy, welcome back, man. Welcome
Thank
back
you.
to a mainframe production. We haven't seen you in a few months. We're so glad you decided to join us here this weekend, man. And Amy, absolutely crushing it. I rewatched the trivia show, the game show last night, and it was amazing.
It is
was
a privilege to lose to Tom Brevoort at trivia.
Really?
I would do it 1,000 times.
We all knew that would happen. Well, I know you guys got a lot of questions for our next guest. I'm going to jump out and just let you have it. Have fun with your mystery guest.
All right, he's been new, he's been mighty, he's been ultimate, but you probably know that he is currently immortal. Please welcome Al Ewing.
Hello, how's it going?
Good morning, man.
And yeah, for me, it's getting on for the late afternoon.
That was going to be my first question, actually.
We're not so far ahead of you guys anymore because the clocks went back for us today. I think for you guys it's another couple of weeks. So
yeah,
we're going to
it's
be
so weird in quarantine to think of time at all, much less thinking of daylight savings time, because I don't know if I need more time or less.
We already don't know what day it is.
For me, it's less time in the morning before the American office opens. So so it's a bad thing until things sync up again. But,
yeah, we're generally sorry about any American news that reaches its way over there.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I'm keeping an eye on things. I'm keeping an eye. I'm crossing my fingers.
Us too.
So we shall see. Yeah, we'll see what comes of that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today
No
for this
problem.
panel. Folks watching right now, I want to make sure you know that you are going to get to ask your questions. When we get to the back half of this panel, we are going to take your questions and pose them to Al Ewing and pretend that we came up with them because we're brilliant. No, we'll give you credit. But you can ask your questions and get some answers. But first, Corey, we've been dying to get into this.
So we did a show a few years back, and Immortal Hulk became a fixture of that show. But
it was this year, Corey.
It was a bit. But before we get to the current Immortal Hulk glory, your work always reads like an encyclopedia of Marvel. There's always this dense, rich mythology that I really love because I've been reading. I learned to read with comics, and it feels like you did too. What got you first into the world of comic that then began this tapestry that you've weaved?
Well, there's I mean, in Britain, there's comics and there's comics. There's more of a tradition of anthology comics for kids, and certainly when I was growing up, it's less so now. But certainly when I was growing up, there was a tradition of as a kid, you'd sort of pick your comic. You'd kind of get your
like Beano or
the Beano, the Dandy. The one I read every week was called Buster. They all had names like that. They all had these like snappy little one word names, and they're all like a collection of like humor characters. So and then from that, I think the idea was that you'd sort of read that for a bit, and it wasn't going to hold. It was decent enough stuff, but none of these things were going to hold like adult attention. But 2000 AD, which was also coming out at the time and still is this it's this science fiction adventure comic, and it was sort of you'd kind of transition from these humor anthologies to these like adventure anthologies of like 4 or 5 strips that were like 4 or 5 pages, and 2000 AD was one of those, and I read that for ages. And in terms of American comics, my first experience would have been they reprinted Secret Wars, the very first Secret Wars crossover. And that is perfect because in issue 1, they stand in a line and they say their names.
I was going to say, you were the reader that was for, where they're like, here's my deal, I'm very strong.
I mean, I knew who Spider-Man was. I knew who the Hulk was. It was like they had reached enough of a kind of... But like, I grew up assuming that like Spider-Man lived in the same universe as like Superman and Batman, that they were all like, American superheroes together. So like, getting that first issue and saying, oh, right, okay, who are the X-Men? This sounds interesting. Who's the Wasp?
This
She's
Beyonder
Dynamite.
guy, he must be very important. This
Oh yeah,
Jerry
he's
curled
hugely
fellow.
important, obviously. Yeah, I mean, it was just a great introduction, both because, the point of that comic was to introduce you to Marvel. And also it had this amazing Mike Zeck art, which was, I still think he's like absolutely beautiful, like just the clear line style that he had.
When did you know comics were the thing for you?
I think very early on, I kind of wanted to do them. 2000 AD did the thing that, and it's similar to, I think it's similar to Marvel in that it's sort of, there was a time when credits on comics were like uncommon. And then, Smiling Stan, Jolly Jack, etc. There was a very similar thing with 2000 AD in that, like, most of the adventure comics had, like, the editor would sort of, be in a letters page or whatever. 2000 AD invented an alien editor called Tharg the Mighty. And as part of the kayfabe, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word right, but you know
How
what
is
I
that
mean,
said out loud? I've seen it written a million times, but
you always thought it was kayfabe, but like it might be kayfabe. Who knows?
It's like Cyttorak. I didn't know how to pronounce it for years. Then it was a movie. I was like, those Crimson.
Oh, I still say Cyttorak. It's like it's one of those words. But like, the as part of the kayfabe of that, they kind of had these little credit boxes that were like, computer punch cards with the name of like the script robot and the art robot. And so, I knew from a very young age that there was a guy called John Wagner who like wrote all my favorite Dread stories. And like, there were people who wrote them. There were people who drew them. This was a job I could have. And, it took me a while to kind of, like, and I knew I wanted to do something creative. I knew I wanted to kind of, I wasn't cut out for like office work. I wasn't cut out for that. I wasn't very good with my hands. It was like, I was good at making stuff up, and I wasn't super good at drawing either. So that kind of rough riding.
You narrowed it right down to the
yeah, exactly. I can draw a bit, but like not like I think if you want to be like an actual artist, you have to be able to like draw a horse or like a car or a window or perspective.
I've heard artists love it when you make them draw cars. I've heard that's their favorite thing.
Yeah, they love it. I always put loads of cars in there for that very reason. But yeah, I was sort of, noodling around through my university years looking for like ways I could avoid work essentially. And like around that time, 2000 AD, like around the time I was kind of working in a bookshop in London, 2000 AD basically published and I got back into it because the year 2000 AD had happened. And I was like, oh, what are 2000 AD going to do? And it turns out, no, they're going to keep the same title because branding. So now, there's a comic called like 20 years ago. And it's all about the future. And, people are still working out how to unravel that Gordian knot of marketing. But like,
the retroactive new future of a fictional world of today.
Everybody knows 2000 AD. And it's like, if you start calling it 3000 AD, that's like, you lose all your readership or whatever.
Sounds like a spin-off, yeah.
Do you remember when Simpsons tried to do 21st Century Fox for a minute, and they were like, no.
Yeah. But what they did was they published the submissions guidelines for writers, and those are pretty much the same submissions guidelines that they have today, like 20 years later. So if you go onto their website, if you're an aspiring writer, and this might be one of the questions we get asked later. If you're an aspiring writer and you go onto the 2000 AD website, then for 6 months out of the year, they have a slush pile. A kind of, you can send your thing in, and for 6 months out of the year, they'll keep it, they'll read it unsolicited, but you have to follow the guidelines, which are there as a kind of like a filter, So if you write it in crayon and like it's just a picture of your feet, then they don't have to read. They don't have to send you a letter back. So you've got to follow the guidelines. But yeah, and that's what I did. I followed the guidelines. I kind of sent a couple of things off. Eventually, I got published, and from there, I knew that I could sell a script. I could make a sale, and that's where it started, and that was 2002.
I've heard a lot of great stuff about the way that 2000 AD makes for both wonderful work in itself and helpful training for a lot of writers, because you have to learn to work within very short stories, and you have to get it done in that way.
It is really useful for that. When you start off, part of these submission guidelines is that when you start off, you have to do one of 3 things, and they're all twist ending stories that are like about 4 pages long. And you either write a future shock, which is science fiction, ideally set in the future, or a time twister, which is time travel stories. Very hard to write, but occasionally they have like a clutch of them. Or a terror tale, which was how I got my start, and those are twist ending horror stories. And it used to be they spent 5 pages on these. Now they've cut it down to 4, so it's even harder. It's really tough to write. Like, you might not think it, because it's like American comics, they're 20 pages. We only find them when they're dead as 22 pages. So like coming up with those extra couple of pages, it's a little extra space, it's a little extra breathing room, but it doesn't like distort the kind of entire story. Cutting from 5 pages to 4 pages, that absolutely does. You're losing a fifth of your story. It's vastly harder. I don't know if I could do it today. I don't know if I could break in that way today.
Yeah, that's some tough. Baby shoes never worn type storytelling. That's a very intensely the breath.
It is tough. I mean, there was a point, and the first thing I ever did with Lee Gilbert was one of these. But there was a point where I was so hard up for work, I basically convinced the editor to like, I was like, what if I send you like 1 pages? And it was literally like begging for work. And I ended up doing about 3 of these like 1 page, these little 1 page kind of, just literally a whole story in a page. And I think the most panels I ever had in one of those was like 7. But like that's kind of almost easier than the 4 pages. The 4 pages, it's a really tough amount of pages to get your head around. There's something about it.
Well, if you look at 3-act structure in movies and 5-act structure in shows, I think we subconsciously become used to that kind of storytelling. Yeah. So to completely undo all of that learning subconsciously, to be like 4 pages.
I know, it's like, I don't know if it's because it's an even number. It's like, 5 pages is 5 acts. It's like every page you can have like another thing happening, another like piece of the story. But like 4 pages, it's like, I don't know, you just get to the end too early.
Well, speaking of mediums and adaptation,
yes,
I love how many works you've done with the Avengers. You've written Mighty Avengers, New Avengers, Ultimates. You've existed in the Ultimate Universe, our universe. The Avengers are very near and dear, seemingly, to you. And we live in a world now where not just we as comic people know Avengers, but like grandparents know Avengers. And now we're about to enter a new age where Disney Plus is adapting 8-hour movies effectively. We're going to be getting Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I'm hearing is like an espionage film over a long form. So we're about to see comic book movies become comic book serials like they are in our medium. what's it been like being in the world of comic books as the world discovers comic books on a much broader scale and then adapts them further and further closer to their original subject matter?
I mean, this is I really noticed this when Infinity War came out because I mean, I go and see the Marvel movies, or I used to. I'm, obviously the current circumstances.
2020.
Yeah, 2020. But I used to like make a point of going to see every Marvel movie like in 3D if I could. And it was because it was like big. I'd get my popcorn, I'd get my soft drink, I'd sort of and especially like, something like Infinity War, you want to see it in 3D. But noticing that was just how it was exactly like a crossover. It was like a Crisis crossover of.
You started with Secret Wars. You recognized what you were seeing there. Stand in the line and say your name.
It was exactly like that. It was just like I was amazed at how well they did it. And then I think Endgame was like the same again, but a little more structured and a little more like a victory lap, as well as there was elements of that. But like, yeah, so that was when I really noticed how much they were borrowing from the comics. But like when I saw Iron Man in 2008, the fact that like the after credits thing, the fact that they were doing like a shared universe at all was just it was mind blowing to me. It was like, that's why I always go and see every Marvel movie. And like, I didn't bother seeing like The Dark Knight Rises. I couldn't really be asked. But if at the end of Dark Knight Returns, Superman had turned up, that might have grabbed me. That might have done it. If like the Flash had walked in, I would okay. I could, but a third one of the same. I wasn't into it. I wasn't like. I mean, I got thrown right out of the. I'm gonna moan about the Nolan movies for a bit. I got thrown right out of those the second Batman spoke, because like Christian Bale, his Bruce Wayne voice, that's a great Batman voice. That's a really, he's very intense. He's just naturally very intense. That's your Batman voice. You don't have to like roar. It's like that. What? No, stop it. Every time you speak, it just takes me right out of everything.
That would be a problem.
Yeah. So like, no, I also the kind of direction, the kind of every fight is like hopping about everywhere. It's like I don't have, I don't have the attention span for that kind of. I'm an increasingly old man.
And now we're going like multi-dimensional, theoretically, with Michael Keaton coming back in Flash, and then we're going to be having our own little corner universes where I think at the end of all this, we're going to have Michael Keaton basically assembling the Sinister Six and assembling a Batverse, and maybe that'll give us amalgam. Who knows?
I'm excited by this. The one thing that slightly worries me is that as movies and TV discover things like going back to the old continuity, having shared universes, having big crossovers, all the things that have been the things comics do, it's like comics is going to have to start doing some new things to keep up. Because it's like, the pipeline goes like one way, it's like.
Do you have any ideas for what those things are that you're going to take comics?
I'm attempting, I'm sort of doing stuff that I've not done before, but it's like, I don't know if that counts. I don't know if like Bible quotes is like going to be enough to kind of.
I would love to ask, because you've obviously you've spent almost a decade adding beautiful pieces to that shared universe of Marvel, but I know Coy and I are both very, very into We Only Find Them When They're Dead, which is your own world with Simone DeMeo. Can you talk a little bit about what made you want to go off and make your own universe there?
I mean, well, it started with the idea, which I've been kind of carrying around for about 4 years now. But it was like the idea of kind of these giant Kirby-esque space gods, and also I have that T-shirt myself, and it's excellent.
KirbyMuseum.org.
Yes, yes, they sell those. They're amazing T-shirts. But like, yeah, I had the Kirby space gods kind of being autopsied for and mined. But it's grown since then. The idea it's sort of grown considerably, and like basically what it gives me is the opportunity to do the shared universe thing, but with the brakes off a little, in that I get to kind of, I mean, the problem with the shared universe is that other people are working there in the same place, and you've got to be considerate, and you've got to sort of, fill up the coffee pot when it's your turn, and like make sure there's milk in the break room and all of this stuff. And it's like that, but with stories. You've got to kind of, it's not even that you've got to put the toys back in the toy box. I've never really been a subscriber to that point of view. I kind of feel like, we're not playing with the toys, we're building the toys. But like, you do have to be considerate of where other people are, so that when you do your big explosion, you're not blowing up anybody else's spot. You're not banging into people. It's, it's like a choreographed thing. It's not a mosh pit. It's not an arena. Whereas, so there are things where, like, I mean, even Jonathan Hickman blew up the entire Marvel Universe. Even he had to ask first, Even he had to run that by somebody. I don't really have to run that by anybody. I can kind of like, I'll sort of, there's Eric Hoban over at Boom. I sort of like run past, okay, here's what book 2 looks like, here's what book 3 looks like, all this stuff. I run it past him, and he's, gives feedback. There's an editorial relationship. But I can basically say, oh yeah, and we're going to just blow up the entire universe and have a new universe. And like, I can do that. And I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, If Simone is down with it, we're doing it. That is the one rule. The only thing that would stop me is if Simone was like, I don't want to draw that. And then I'd think of something else. But he hasn't said that yet.
So one thing I noticed was the scope of this is obviously, insurmountable. They're gods in space. It's about as big and broad as it gets. And it's new characters because you're not playing in a familiar sandbox. But I noticed how immediately endearing all the characters were, because they have to be, because you're meeting them and then meeting gods floating in space. So designing these brand new characters in your own universe and all of that, what's it like, kind of like having your own children instead of playing with people that already have so much backstory, like brand new canon?
I mean, again, there's that thing of like, I can be mean to them. I can be like, I can do things like, I'm starting to get slightly into spoiler territory here. In that there's around about issue 5 or so, there are things that happen to the characters. But like, I've kind of planned like, I planned about 15 issues of this, and and a hard stop after that. It's going to be
15 or 50?
15.
Okay.
It's literally, it's like 3 chapters, 3 books, and bang, and then we'll have the world afterwards, and maybe we can return to that world, but that story will be over, because it's like, I really want to kind of I want to tell like a story.
It's your 3-act structure. It's not 4 pages. It's 3 sets of 5.
3 sets of 5, exactly. But that's another thing. That's a choice I can make. But in terms of the character, it's like, it's weird. On the one hand, I'm sort of, if they don't go, if they don't go down well, if people don't like them, then or get bored, or worse, get bored of them, then like that's a very scary prospect, because that's all my fault. It's like, I can't like go in and go like, oh, I'm gonna write the best, Hamster Man, and then somebody on a message board goes, oh, I've always hated Hamster Man, I'm not picking this up. That's not my fault. That's not the. If somebody reads like 2 issues away and find them they're dead and go like, I'm just not engaged by these characters, that is my fault. So that's really scary. But also the idea of doing things with them, and to an extent to them. If I decide to kill somebody off, I feel absolute freedom to do that. Absolute freedom to just like, any of these people could die at any time, because it's like, it doesn't matter how much potential they have. It doesn't matter how like pleasant they are to be around. It's like, if the thing for the story is that they go, then they go. And whereas if you kill like, Marvel Super off, that's like somebody with like 40 years of history who doesn't belong to me. So it's like, if somebody dies in Marvel, they will probably be back. Barring like Uncle Ben at this point. I think he's the only one left.
It used to be Bucky, Gwen, and Ben, and I'm pretty sure it's just Ben now. I mean, one's a spider accessory, but
I think Gwen, it's more of a technicality with Gwen. I think Bucky, is absolutely, he never died. But like, Uncle Ben did die, and it would be very bad. Oh wait, I'm forgetting Captain Marvel. I'm forgetting Marvel.
Ah, that's true. Because Spider Gwen I accept, because I like that Spider Gwen is like an alternate universe, so it feels like a flavor choice. And luckily we haven't gotten 616 back, but Marvel, I love the sanctity of that. So we've got 2 out of thousands.
You put the Marvel graphic novel in it. Was it Guardians? You had someone actually reading it on a panel?
Oh no, that was Juan Cabal, who is I love working with him. He is wild and crazy, and he will do things like that, and I'll just be like, yeah, whatever, man, that's cool. You have a good time. So yeah, in the Marvel universe, the death of Captain Marvel is a sought after. I mean, in the Marvel universe, Marvel Comics puts out. So presumably that was like dictated to Jim Starlin by like, the top guy on Titan. I think it's Mentor of Titan, whatever. The top guy of Titan like dictated that to Jim Starlin.
You killed Robin, now killed Captain Marvel. You killed him well.
Other way around, I think Marvel got his fangs sharpened for everything that would follow. But a beautiful moment.
Tom Taylor put this book in 7 Secrets, right?
Yeah. No, I saw that. I noticed that there was like, it's good. I like that. I should. It's a little difficult being set like 200 or 300 years into the future to have like surviving copies of 7 Secrets. Or I would do it back, but like, maybe I'll find a way. Maybe I'll find a way to slip that in.
So speaking of killing off Marvel heroes, in some cases repeatedly to no effect, Coy, I feel like I've been holding you back. I know that you were dying to get us to the Immortal Hulk.
Yep.
This is one of the only books that has been banned from my show, because I do the show Comic Book Shopping, where I recommend people read comic books that I think will change their lives, and I recommended this book too often. Immortal Hulk is such a genre-redefining and genre-defining book for so many reasons, and you mentioned the Bible quotes, and there are so many things that are so integral to its format. I'm wondering what it was like the first time you took hold of this Hulk that felt like yours, because I've never read a Hulk like this, and I want to know what the impetus was to make this like metal as bleep book. I love this book.
I mean, it's the brief I was given was to the brief I was given was basically do a new direction and like a horror direction, and that kind of came out of like, you know, there's a lot of sort of great minds thinking alike on that, because I've been sort of pushing a horror direction for the Hulk in No Surrender, and that had gone down very well, and I kind of competed a little bit for like the main book because I hadn't sort of had a big hit in a while, so you know, and the Hulk is a big character. But like right from the start, like in the pitch, in the brief, there was like a kind of, you know, I almost didn't like pitch a story. I pitched like the tone. And it was kind of, and there are a lot of things where we were just like, we had to throw out all of the rules. It was the only way it was gonna work, was if we, and there was, you know, that was kind of, everybody was on the same page with that. There was never a point where like anybody said like, are we breaking too many rules? Are we like doing, you know, are we doing this wrong? So yeah, I guess really what kind of, because we did, I was very happy that because it started off selling well for a Hulk book, and then it went into like selling well for a Marvel book, and then there was that world period where it was outselling Batman and we didn't know what was going on. But like those were issues that were like, and it was like that's when it really hit home, because, you know, I was kind of doing stuff like I was thinking like, okay, we'll have the Avengers guest star, because at this point sales are going to need a little bit of a bump. And it's like, no. And I was thinking things like, okay, well, we're going to do this 3-parter that's set in hell and is going to be full of stuff about like the Kabbalah and the kind of, you know, the Zoroastrian gods and like the dichotomy of good and evil. And it's going to be like this kind of weird, and we're going to lose readers by the truckload, and I'm resigned to that. And you know, well, and we no, and then the issues that were like outselling Batman and like doing insanely well were the ones where like, you know, Doc Samson is having like a long conversation with Hulk about environmental politics. And I think that was the moment when like something in my brain broke, and I just realized we can do whatever we want. And we don't have to worry. We don't have to worry about like, and like there was all this, because originally I plotted to like the end of the Hell arc. And that was going to be like, and then I had this like, okay, and then if we're doing well enough, I can either, you know, build on for like a potential stop at like issue 16, or, you know, whenever the usual cancellation point is. Or we can keep going to like issue 25 or so. And like, you know, there were like these discussions about should we end it at 25? And, you know, that's where all those rumors came out of. But it was like, basically by the time we started out selling, it was like, no, we're never stopping. We're never stopping. We're gonna do a stop.
Yeah, it's a good thing you didn't call him the very finite Hulk. I love this question from Fools Get Dunked. And by the way, thank you to everyone sending comments. KB Tibbs, who says he's going to have to go out and get what we only find them when we're dead. Fools Get Dunked says, I love Immortal Hulk. How much research went into the perfect blend of referencing the past while managing to put such a cool spin on the Hulk mythos? Seriously, I can't recommend this series enough.
Oh, there was a lot of research. Anytime I bring a character in, I kind of go back and I check like previous appearances and sort of try and get a sense of them, a sense of like who they are. But like, and also and I've stopped doing this. If you go to my Tumblr, it's a dead zone. I haven't updated it in like a couple of months. But like I was doing a read through like from the start, and I've got up to somewhere around in the 200s. I feel like, or like nearly the 200s.
You're close there. It's a lot of comments on Hulk making friends. It's delightful.
Yeah, it's like I need to get back to that because it's like I need to make time because it's like it's really useful doing that giant read through, and I feel like there's just a really small area now where I don't have like intimate knowledge of it, either from like growing up with it or from reading through it and like making a note of like every panel where like I can apply one of my little tags on the Tumblr and like because it was meant as like, okay, I've got all these through lines, how often they turn up in the classic run? A lot, it turns out. So there is a lot of that. Also, the thing that spurs us to kind of Fools Get Dunked very kindly called it the perfect blend. One of the things is that we decided not to do recap pages, and that was a tonal thing. At the start, we were like, we're not doing recap pages, we're not doing editorial like asterisk captions, we're not doing the thing we did in Ultimates where we have further reading. And the reason for that is that at no point subconsciously do we want to tell the reader that they have to read another comic first.
I like that.
So every issue has to, and we're like nearly 39 issues in. I think 39 is out Wednesday. We're like 39 issues in at this point. We've it's no longer a thing where you could pick it up and you don't have to have read the previous 38 issues. But hopefully if you haven't read the previous 38 issues, you'll at least be wowed by Joe's visuals. It's like,
and I love the format choice of doing the title page at the end, because it's often this great, like, it's either like an inside joke or like the title itself is the lead up for the next big event. And to me, that makes it one of the more approachable books, because it's like, oh, this book is telling me what this book's about, and I get to be shocked every time as a weekly reader. So the formatting's brilliant. And
should I answer this new question?
Yes.
Yeah, we've got Tevya Smolka saying, Al Ewing question, I'm just wondering, after Immortal Hulk, what are you going to do next? Because for me personally, I would really love for you to write Superman book, or maybe Animal Man from DC Comics. I second Animal Man for sure.
I mean, it would be, those are some big shoes to fill with Animal Man. The title at the end thing, that was a pretty direct steal from Grant Morrison.
Animal Man.
No, I saw it in Sea Guy. I saw in Sea Guy the title would always be right at the end on the last on the splash page. And when I was doing Ultimates, I was like, oh, let's do that. I've been wanting to do that for a while. Let's do that. And then so it was like Marvel Comics presents the Ultimates in ... And that was, if you go back and read Sea Guy, it's a direct lift. And then we did a kind of adaptation, a version of that on Hulk, and it really works. I recommend it to everybody. It really works. It's a great format beat to steal. But to answer the question, I do have an exclusive with Marvel at the moment, which means that I can do create your own work. I can do some 2000 AD work. And I have done both of those. I think the one thing they would frown on the most is writing Superman for DC Comics. I think if I were to say,
as a little outside the boundaries there.
I think if I were to say to the talent management people at Marvel, hey, would my contract allow me to write Superman for DC Comics? I would get an email back saying no. Why would you ask that?
He wasn't in Secret Wars. I've been looking for this Superman character.
Also, I am enjoying what Brian Bendis is doing at the moment. I'm enjoying the sort of new take on Superman. I think there's a lot of kind of, the Bendis energy on that is a really fun kind of. It's a really fun thing to sort of add to Superman. It reminds me a lot of the Super Soap of the 90s, which was when I got really into Superman as a regular reader.
I've never heard it referred to that way, but that's perfect.
To very briefly answer what I'm doing next, we've got huge plans for Guardians. I'm running a book called Sword, which has recently been announced. That's in the X universe. That's also a space book. Lots of space stuff for Marvel. There is a thing that has not yet been announced, which I think people will be very, very happy with. Actually, there are two things that have not yet been announced that I think people will be very, very happy with. What they are and who I am working with on them, I won't say, but I have more work coming for Marvel.
I am very hopeful that with Immortal Hulk and Empire and so much of your wonderful work in the forefront right now, people are going to have a chance to discover all of the wonderful work you've been doing over there. And that leads us to this question from David Robertson. In your criminally underrated Ultimates run, with such a cosmic storyline, do you change up your thought process rather than a character or tonal focus with books like Immortal Hulk? Thanks.
There is definitely... With Immortal Hulk, it's a little tricky because Immortal Hulk has got very cosmic. There's not such a huge difference between those. Ultimates had a lot of character beats in it. Immortal Hulk got a lot of cosmic stuff in it. You know, all of the Hell stuff, all of the stuff around issue 25 at the end of time. With the stuff... the Sword stuff that's coming up, it's like, it's, you know, it's kind of it's very character focused. It's almost like a workplace drama, but like there are going to be moments when we go as big as Ultimates ever did. So there's definitely a tonal shift in my head depending on the kind of beat that I'm writing. And here's the thing. Here's the closest to that. I have little playlists on Spotify, and I've made some of them public. So, like, if you happen to be following me on Spotify, then you can you'll see like the old playlists for Loki, and there's a playlist for Immortal Hulk which I keep updating. It's something like 60 songs now. And there are other playlists that I haven't made public yet because, you know, they're for series that... But every time I do a new series, I'll at least start a new playlist. And that's to kind of keep me, like, tonally... And I mean, you know, they all blur into one. There's a lot of songs that are the same on all of them. And, you know, the purpose of them is basically just to keep me... They're all songs that I've listened to so many times that I don't get distracted by them. But that's kind of keep me in a sort of emotional frame of mind. Like when I was writing Empire, I had my special action playlist for like that I kind of switch to whenever I'm doing like, you know, big actiony fight scenes. But like character wise, you know, every series has its own playlist for all the character beats.
I want to ask this question for this person, but first I've got one of my own that I've been twitching to ask. With Immortal Hulk, there's this incredible like geopolitical capitalism element that you touched on as saying like you discovered you could write anything. Was there a moment when the numbers went so crazy that you were able to put a storyline in that you'd been ruminating on for years that worked in this line? Like, because I love that Roxxon's been around in Marvel forever, but we've never made the villainy of this perspective that's so affecting our real world through a cosmic lens so accessible. Like, this book feels so bizarrely accessible while being about broad things. Was there a storyline you've been ruminating on?
Not really. I don't think it's not so much that like I kind of saw the sales figures and I thought, oh, well, now I can tell this story that I've been sitting on for years. It was more that I just felt a kind of freedom of thought. And like, it's not like we hadn't gotten political before then. You know, we'd done like issue 11, we'd done some stuff for Jackie. Obviously the big environmental speech. But I'd sort of like, you know, I'd written those and I'd sent those and I'd thought like, oh, people are going to be having a go at me. And that didn't really happen in that, like, you know, obviously there's like the usual suspects, but it's like the fans of the book have been like really, really in our corner. And I think across... almost across the political spectrum. I think, you know, if you're a Hulk fan, you're okay with it because that's kind of who the Hulk is. He's an anti-authority, anti-military. Even in the 60s when Iron Man was like designing transistors to help in the Vietnam War, Hulk was like chucking tanks around and like punching military. Iron Man was like designing weapons for military. Hulk was destroying weapons. The latest weapons used on him by the military, Hulk would just smash them up. So that's like baked in right at the start is this like extreme. But no, I did feel
There's
a
a certain
sense
smashy element to the whole thing.
yeah. I did feel a sense of freedom that I think allowed me to kind of think in directions, and I think probably the biggest beneficiary of that was Charlene McGowan, because around like quite early on I started thinking like I think this is a trans character, and I'd sort of the more of it I kind of, and like by around like issue 20, I was thinking like, okay, I've got to talk to some people and like, get a close reader in and sort of tell this story, or rather introduce this element to the story, because I wasn't really interested in writing like a special issue. I just wanted to bring the whole character into the comic. And it's like, so, I talked to Crystal Fraser, who is an amazing person, and like was just the biggest help with those issues, the hugest help, because it's like, I try and, I try and be thoughtful. I try and take a lot of things into account, but it's like, everything I write is like through the filter of, this sort of white British dude of a certain age. So like, she was just this massive help. But
And
like,
you're a guy who does his research, and I love that that's what that looks like.
Yeah. So yeah, that would probably be, but I don't want to be like, oh, I wouldn't have done that if I felt precarious, because like maybe I would have, but if the sales hadn't been that high, maybe we wouldn't have gotten there. Maybe we wouldn't have reached, maybe we'd have stopped at 24 and we'd never have had like the point in the narrative to tell that, to bring that in, to bring that part of the story in. But I mean, that's a really different thing from being like, oh, the sales are huge, I can have a trans character. It's not that cut and dried. It's never that cut and dried.
I could stay on that forever because I'm fascinated.
Yeah, sure.
But I want to make sure that we do get some more of these in. Some Okie Dude says, Al, really love what you're doing with the Hulk. I'm sure you've gotten this before, but did you take any from Alan Moore's reimagining of Swamp Thing when writing The Immortal Hulk?
Yes, is the short answer. That was part of the brief. It was like, Tom sent the email, and I was like, I mentioned what we were kind of, and this was like after we'd done those surrenders. So this was after we'd done the kind of, oh, he never actually dies beat. Or rather, after I pitched that, I think it was before we'd done that like 10-page insert with Joe, which gets into the mechanics of it. But one of the things Tom Brevoort put in that like original email was like, in terms of a tonal shift, aim high, shoot for the stars, like something like think of The Anatomy Lesson, like that level of, this is not the comic you thought you were reading. And it's like, so it's not like, please rip off Alan Moore. It's like, aim that high, think in those terms. Like, Alan Moore, arguably the greatest writer comics has ever had. We want that out of you. We want that level of work.
No pressure.
Yeah,
Just
no
mess.
pressure. No pressure. But like, that was kind of the that was the brief, you know. That was like, and I've had kind of I've had emails like that since, where it's like, yeah, this is what we want out of you. And you know, it's nice that like editorial think that I have it in me to deliver that sometimes. It's a compliment. It's a very nice thing to hear, and a very scary thing to hear.
When you're out selling Batman with environmental diatribes, I mean, sometimes the expectations get lifted.
I mean, I feel like that was kind of a black swan moment. But it was like, you know, that pretty much broke my brain in terms of like, oh, this is what you have to do to sell a comic. It's like, oh, well, evidently nothing matters. That's when there's a Grant Morrison quote, which is like, he's describing something. He says, that was the moment I became a supervillain. And it's like, yeah, that was the moment that I became a supervillain.
Well, we've got another one from Tevya. Tevya Smoka says, question, I'm just wondering if you were given the chance to write Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and Mary Jane, would you bring back the marriage between Peter and Mary Jane and have a daughter someday?
Probably not. I feel like that train has sailed. I think it makes a good source of like alternate universe future Spider-Man stories. I don't know what I do with Spider-Man. Spider-Man's one of those characters where it's like, if I start thinking about what I do with them, I'm kind of thinking about taking away some of these jobs, so I don't. Occasionally an idea will pop into my head for like, oh, this would be a good Spider-Man story. But it's like, you know, unless somebody asks like, what are you thinking about in terms of this character? I generally don't, you know, I've kind of got enough to think about. But I probably wouldn't do that. I probably wouldn't do things that have been, this is a weird thing to say in the context of like Immortal Hulk, but I probably wouldn't do things that have been done before. I don't know, thinking about it, I don't know if I'd even have like the Spider-Man Mary Jane relationship. I mean, or romantically, I don't know. I have no idea. But it's like, I can't really thinking about it, because thinking about it is, you know, thinking about taking away Nick Spencer's job, and I don't want to do that. So yeah, that's as best I can do. Any very, very quick, I know we're running out of time. Any other characters that you would like to write, or has someone already answered that? Sorry, I'm taking your jobs now.
No, brilliant. That was what we were going to say.
We got
You're
Spencer.
psychic.
Yes, I would love to have a crack at Doctor Strange. And who's to say that I am not, even as we speak, having a go at Doctor? No, that's you know, that's gonna be that's just like, that's gonna be on all of the websites tomorrow. No, it's I would like
Bleedingcool.net says Al Ewing writing Doctor Strange.
I would like to write Doctor Strange. I have written Doctor Strange in that I keep guest starring him in things, and every time I do, I really enjoy it. So yeah, maybe someday I'll get to do an even more Doctor Strange heavy book. There was that run of Valkyrie where he just turned up every issue, because I was just like, oh, who can we? Oh, let's bring in Doctor Strange again. And it was just like, it was practically like, you know, Marvel team up with Valkyrie and Doctor Strange for like something like 4 issues. So I do really like writing Doctor Strange. So yeah, that would be one of these days, one of these years. Maybe I'll get to write the solo.
Actually, Valkyrie was one of my favorite. I didn't expect to love this books of recent, because I know the character and I appreciate the character, but it was an incredible run. Is there a certain artist relationship that surprised you? Because I never expected Valkyrie to be visually that style, and then it was this beautiful, almost painted style. Like, is there any relationship you've had and you've been like,
I love, there are so many artists I've loved working with. I feel like to list them would be I mean, you know, a few, and I'm gonna miss some, but like, I love, you know, working with Joe Bennett is great always. Lee Garbett, I always love working with. Javier Rodriguez, a joy. Similarly, Juan Cabal, Valerio. Love working with Valerio. Everyone I'm currently working with, it goes without, if I've missed somebody, it goes without saying, I'm having the best time with the Odyssey right now. But of the past, it's very, very few who I've not had like a terrific relationship with, and I probably wouldn't mention their names because that'd be mean. But everyone I'm working with currently, I love them. So,
do we have any last questions in chat before we lose Al Ewing? Everyone, please make sure you're reading these books.
One-word answers. I can.
Any yes/no questions? We can do a speed round.
Why did that? Which one? So many. Given that I just mentioned Lee Garbett, I'm going to assume you meant Loki there. Why did Loki end? Secret Wars 3 or 4 was about to happen. And so, Secret Wars 3 or 4 was about to happen. So the entire universe was being destroyed. We did have a pitch for what might come after. It didn't hit the mark. It was just that book's time. It was, it was already, I think if Secret Wars hadn't happened, then 18 would have been the last issue. We did have ideas to kind of carry it on after that. I think, if I had it all to do again, I might pitch something different for a follow-up, and maybe that would be more successful. But, so it goes. I'm very happy that Loki has remained Loki since then, in roughly the form we left him in. He wears shoes now. I hate that. But, aside from that, aside from that he wears shoes like an idiot, I'm very happy with the direction Loki's gone.
I worked at a shop for a long time, and the Loki trades became the sought-after item for quite some time. People were still discovering that series. So thank you for all of the things that you've contributed that people can go back and find now when it is the right time for them to find them.
It's always the best. The best thing is when somebody. There are two of the best things. The second best thing is when somebody comes up to me and says, "I've never read comics before. This is my first." And the very best thing is I was dealing with a thing and this helped. And that is the very best thing. But the second best thing is something you wrote got me into comics. That's the goal. More people reading comics from a purely mercenary perspective. More people reading comics. So I still have a job next year.
If you've never read a comic, Immortal Hulk, we only find them when they're dead. Both very accessible and awesome and life-changing.
Thank you.
And jump into Empire. They may not stand in a line and say their names, but it's an incredibly satisfying story, and you will enjoy it, I promise.
That's why we have recap pages now.
Thank you so much, guys. Coy, Amy, this was an absolute delight. Al, I can't say enough about how appreciative we are that you joined us here at Baltimore Comic-Con. The people in the chat were so grateful, and they had such a good time. So thank you so much.
It was a great time for me as well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, guys. Well, stick around. We're going to take about a 2-minute break, and then we're going to be back with Tom King and Dave Gibbons. Yes, you heard me correct. Tom King and Dave Gibbons in about 2 minutes. Al, Coy, Amy, and everybody else watching at home, we'll see you in just a little bit.